Welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. Are you employed by a small business? Do you receive services from one? You'll be glad you stopped by today's program because I'm going to be joined by author and business planning expert Randy Long. We'll be discussing the challenges that business owners face when transferring or selling their business. I'll also give you the inside scoop on how to avoid getting bad financial advice. Let's roll. All right, welcome back. I just can't get enough of talking about business succession planning, and thank God I have Randy Long back with me to talk more about it. Randy.
It's great to be here again, my friend.
Good to see you. All right, so Long Business Advisors.
Yes,
you
sir.
do business consulting for folks that want to sell their business down the road at some point.
Or transition to their children.
All right, excellent.
Yep.
Now you bring a kind of interesting combination of expertise to this task. Certified financial planner.
Yes.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
An attorney, JD, by
Yes.
training.
Yes.
You did a lot of estate planning work, and and you're also a certified exit planner.
Correct.
So you're certified at helping people plan their exit.
I am.
Okay, excellent. Offices, North Carolina, California?
Right.
Okay. Randy said there was going to be a quiz. I'm just trying to make sure. I want to make sure the audience knows who you are because I find what you do very interesting. Randy's also written the book, The Brave Heart Exit, and that's what it takes, right? You have to have a brave heart to prepare to make your exit from a business.
Yes, you do. It takes guts both to run it and to plan for your own exit.
I'm on the front end of that, where
are.
I am, I started my company in 1997, and I still think I have a lot of road ahead of me. But the things I think about are the things that I know that you talk about every day, which is how to make the business more and more a business that I work on and don't just work in.
Correct. And also, the other thing about the exit that you're planning versus the exit that you may have, because I don't know if you'll be here tomorrow, and I don't know if I will be.
True.
So we have to plan for that too.
So what are some of the things that you do primarily in working with the business owner? What are some of the main services you provide?
Wow, every case that we work on is differently. But one of the things we talked about earlier was building a team.
Right.
So a team is a big piece of it, particular to your situation. And the other thing, of course, is to help the business owner make decisions and prepare for that transition. And there's a lot of moving parts to that.
Now, are you saying you actually tailor your services to what the business owner needs?
Every single one.
Because that's what I do. Everything is, there's never been the exact same scenario.
Doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen. So when we think about what an owner needs to do, I guess before we get to that, this is kind of a loaded, but I think a very interesting question. When does a business owner know it's time to sell or start planning on selling?
Yeah, so I would say that certainly by your mid-40s, on a normal transition person who wants to be out at 60 to 65 or something,
okay.
Starting to think about that, especially if there's a transition to the next generation. So that's one thing. The other thing is, in general, is what I would call the fire in the belly test.
Okay.
When you're starting to look ahead and you think to yourself, gosh, I don't want to be doing this 5 years from now,
Okay.
you should be in the planning stage at that point.
So passion maybe needs to trade for planning.
It does, definitely.
And for every business, it's going to be different. Every business owner is going to be different. But so they have to think about, okay, where do I want to be? Now, we've all heard stories of people that start their business for the first time in their 60s. I mean, so there's no, there's no timetable here that applies to everybody.
No, I've had some of those, as a matter of fact. One of my clients started a construction business in a different area of construction when he was 60, and he had a couple of kids that took over the construction company that he had.
Okay.
But he started a new construction company, and it became an exit problem 5 years later.
Wow.
It was very successful.
I guess those are good problems for
he
business
loved
owners
it.
to have, right?
Hey, he loved it.
That's interesting. Well, so you mentioned a couple things that I know that will be helpful for us to understand. When we talk about the actual selling of the business, and the business owners decide to do that, and we go through some of the planning and all those pieces, what about, because again, I think we, as you often recommend, Randy, start with the end in mind.
Right.
For the business owner, how should they be thinking about structuring the actual sale of the business? Because for the business owners who never looked at that, it may be a lot different than they think it will be.
Yeah, first of all, I would say if I'm representing the business people, I want to make sure that we have good counsel, because the counsel, which may be an M&A firm or investment banking firm, will help us, of course, with the structure issues, but there are many ways. Sometimes we like the best one, of course, is cash.
Right.
Because sometimes cash is all you get. In other words, there are certain businesses that are sold and structured in such a way that, let's say you got 70% cash and 30% of a note or 30% of an earnout. So if you had sold your business assuming that you're going to make 35% gains every year and the business only makes 20, you lose a piece of that money that you would have had. And so I always tell the people that I'm working with, let's get as much cash as we can, and we do our planning on the cash. And if the rest of things show up, we'll be happy about that.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I like that. Yeah. So when you think about the consequences of how the deal's structured, one of, the business owner, of course, agrees with you. They like the idea of getting the cash, and I think in a lot of business owners' minds, they think, I'll get a check, I'll hand them the keys, and I'll be done. Of course, that's not really always that practical.
Not always. It depends on how well the business owner has set himself up for that transition. If he has done what we've asked him to do is make himself pretty much irrelevant to the business, then that does happen for most of our clients. They don't need to be there another day.
Yeah.
So that's the goal there. But the structure piece comes up, I just want to mention too, on an employee sale as an example.
Sure.
If you're selling to an employee and you've got to structure it in such a way that the business sort of buys itself over time, because typically the employees, or even the kids if you're going to sell to a kid, doesn't have the money. And so you typically have to seed it a little bit with either a gift or an initial sale. And then after that, the company can kind of pay for itself over time, but you can also set up growth targets that they have to hit before they can get the next level, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's conservative ways to do it, and also, finally, we want to make sure that the business owner doesn't transition control until he's paid off.
I totally
That's
agree
a very big...
You're in good company, because I do have some control issues when it comes to things like that.
Me too.
Don't give up control until you've gotten everything you need.
That's right, because too often, especially, we'll have people call us and ask us if we can help them because, they sold their business to an employee, they signed the note, they're 15 months into the sale, the business has gone to hell in a handbasket, and they need to get the company back.
Yeah.
I mean...
And they're like, what do we do?
Because they're not paying us.
Right.
Right? It's just, so we want to avoid all of those shipwrecks if we can.
When you talk about some of those different scenarios and we talk about getting cash and how you structure it, one of the things that I hear, and again, this is partly because of my CPA background, is I'll hear taxes a lot.
Yep.
And what I always remind people, and I'm curious to know what your take is on that, is don't let taxes drive the car.
Right.
They can be in the car, they can even sit next to you in the car, but they shouldn't be driving the car, because then you'll end up making maybe a decision that puts you in a precarious position as it relates to how the deal is structured.
Right. We want them to do what they believe they should do, and then we'll bring the tax people in to try to structure it in such a way that it works. But like you said, we don't like the tax tail to wag the dog, if you will, because typically decisions made based on tax are the wrong decision.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So when we think about this process, and I know it's going to vary, but I think I'd be curious to know, how long should it take? Let me break it in two pieces.
Yeah.
How long should it take to prepare the business to be sold, and then how long should it actually take to sell the business?
Okay. So one of the goals that we have for our clients, if you own a business and you're watching this, one of the goals that we would have for you is to have you run your business in such a way that it's always ready for a sale or a transition. There's work to get to that point, but that should be your goal, so that you're planning to make the company worth more money is also planning for your exit. So these things should be started early and continuing all the way until you're out, frankly. If we get hired in, we love to have at least 3 years.
Okay.
Sometimes as many as 10. There's some tax issues for that and some estate planning things. And we also like to get companies, if we can, before they cross a $10 or $20 million threshold, just because, especially if the companies are growing fast, we can do some really cool planning things for people that are growing fast and they're not overly huge yet, and can set up the family for many, many generations to come, and there's just a lot of cool options. And everything costs more the bigger you get, the longer you wait to plan, period.
So if you can get those things done on the front, it'll be less expensive
Definitely,
and more effective.
Definitely. It's the old, you used to say, pay me now or pay me later. Yeah. It's a lot more expensive later, to both me and the government, frankly.
Well, so as you're planning that out, you're thinking ahead, and so you need the time. And then once you've you've decided, okay, I'm now no longer, as Randy puts it, I'm no longer relevant. And I think for a lot of business owners who might be watching the program, that they think, wait a minute, I'm relevant. This is my company. I started it, Randy. What are you saying? I'm relevant. You're telling them, though, you want to increase the maximum value of the business, they have to become less relevant?
They do, no doubt about it. And it is a hard pill to swallow when it's been your baby and you've spent the last 30 years building it and growing it and your identity is wrapped up in it. It shouldn't be, because you're not a business. You know, you're an individual, and you need to go ahead and start extricating yourself from that mindset, because that mindset is the mindset of something that's going to cost you a lot of money one of these days.
Yeah, agreed. So once they've gotten that wrapped up in their mind, and they've done the planning ahead, and they get to this point of, you know, somewhat less relevant, okay?
Yep.
How long should it take for them to then sell the business?
Okay, so there's going to be a process that we're going to go through. There's some cleanup of the business itself, some accounting issues. As an example, if you've got a vacation home inside of your corporation,
yeah, that's going to have to come out.
We got to squeeze that out. We've got to, and when you're a business owner, you run the company in such a way that the business maximizes value to the family, and we support that. We're really good at planning for that. But when it comes time to sell, we have to rebuild those books, if you will, to show a buyer what the company would be like if the owner hadn't been squeezing profits out in different ways.
Right.
So we recast the books. So that stuff has to be done. And after that stuff is done and we're ready to actually go to market, then we would hire that M&A firm. We would have a legal firm do a quick review of all of our books and all the things that go with this, our minute book and our stock record, all the things that, and intellectual property, to make sure that's clear and clean. So all the things that we need to have in place, and then we hire that investment banking firm and the lawyers that are going to be the deal lawyers, and from there it takes us typically 8 to 9 months on the short end.
Okay.
12 to 15 months, hopefully, on the long end.
So we're looking at maybe a 6-month to 2-year process.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it probably averages in the 12-month range if we do it well. I don't know, almost all the businesses that we have managed the sales for have gone right around 9 months to 13 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've kind of touched on the next thing I wanted to ask you about, but so it'll dovetail kind of nicely with what you just shared, is what are some of the common mistakes you see business owners make? You've talked about some of the things you need to do, so if you don't do those, then obviously those are some mistakes, but what are some of the other things you see that they do that you'll, oh my gosh, if you just talk to me?
Right. That's what I don't like to hear is, you know, if I'd have just called you, right. Yeah. So this one is really important if you're the business owner. Don't poison the well. Don't poison the well. And that means if you think that you're ready to sell and you go out and you think that you've got a likely buyer and you want to go out and start negotiating with them on your own. With all due respect, again, you may not know what the company's worth. You may not know what the market is bearing. There's a whole host of information you do not know. And secondly, if I'm buying a business, by the way, I don't want an investment banking firm in the way. I don't want to. I want to be able to negotiate one-on-one with the business owner, because my negotiating skills, I promise you, are probably above his. And I will eventually ratchet him down, and then he'll sell. If you do that, and the deal, of course, it probably isn't going to be structured well, and all the things fall apart too often. But again, the big point is we want to do a controlled auction, is what it's called, so that we have the firm is going to send it out to however many necessary, sometimes 50, 80 possibilities, and then we'll bring in 4 to 6, 4 to 8 companies.
This is all done confidentially, though, right?
Definitely, all confidential.
Because you hear the word auction, you know.
It's not a public auction, it's a private. Yeah, so the employees, typically employees and the people around the area aren't aware of it. As a matter of fact, when you do the first you send out the first term sheet, if you will, the idea that people are going to have, we're interested in this company that has these characteristics, but you don't get a name or an industry even.
Okay, right, sure.
Right, so then and once they sign confidentiality agreements and all those, then you start disclosing more things to them. And then we squeeze out the ones that aren't willing to pay what our number is, and we get the ones that are willing to pay the most. Those people we bring in to the controlled auction, and we work that auction back and forth until we get the one that is sometimes pays the most. Sometimes he doesn't pay the most, but it's the best fit for the culture of the company. And so in our Braveheart world, like we said, we like the business owners here. It's not all about them. You know, they have key employees that have helped them build the business.
Sure.
And actually, in putting this whole thing in place, by the way, we would typically try to tie down key talent, key employees, key everything, so that they also benefit from a sale, frankly. And so sometimes those things are called stay bonuses or golden handcuffs or all that kind of stuff, you know.
That's good. Yeah, that's all part of the value of the business. If you're trying to, show that this is transferable, well, then the people that are going to help make it transferable have to be there, right?
They have to be there. You don't want that next level management team to tell you that they're leaving when they find out the sale's happening.
Yeah, that's going to create a problem.
Sometimes they hold you hostage, which we've had happen a time or two.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes we have asked the business owners always to let us tie down the people we really need. And they have told us on a couple of occasions that they're not going to do that. They don't need to share any of the sales proceeds or any of those kinds of things because the people are loyal and they'll stay. And twice we've had people hold them hostage and basically say they're going to leave or kill the deal unless they get X. And it's more than they would have been paid.
If they had been done, again, with some proper
It's extortion,
planning.
essentially, right?
Yeah. So the common theme here is planning ahead.
Planning ahead.
Because you want to avoid the problems. And I guess that brings me to the other question I wanted to ask Randy, is about how can a business owner protect themselves from some of these problems that they run into? I mean, planning ahead is key. Getting the right team in place is key.
That's correct.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, and also taking into consideration the other stakeholders. We mentioned that a little bit earlier in a prior show, that you want to bring in the kids and make sure everybody knows what's going on and how things are going to transition and what the goals are. And it also opens up discussion within the family about, well, how do we transition, depending on whether it's inside of the company or outside? Are they going to sell to a third party, or is my brother taking over? So you want to put to bed as much of that conflict in advance as you can, because those things. I had a case, some years ago where I always bring the wife in on the first meeting and say, I want the wife at the meeting. And this husband was adamant that his wife didn't need to be there and she would do whatever we told her to. And I was really uncomfortable with that. We did our deal, and we're at the close, and there's a room full of lawyers and papers laid out on a long table for everybody to sign. And he goes through and signs, and she shows up and she says, I'm not signing this. Nobody talked to me. I'm not given my permission. We're done here. And we're talking about a year's worth of work and a lot of money.
Wow.
And so we ended up saving the sale a full year later for 10% less.
Communication and planning ahead.
Don't underestimate what your family's impact on the business is going to be, or the exit.
Everybody needs to think through those things and be involved.
They do.
Yeah, excellent. Very good, Randy. Randy Long, again with us today, talking about how to make your Braveheart exit, and also for what people need to know about how businesses work. So thanks again, Randy. Glad to have you with me.
Love being here.
All right, very good. Okay, it's time for The Scoop. This is the segment of the program where I give you some inside information, if you will, on the world of finance. Today's topic is how to avoid bad advice. Now, let me start with a preface. The majority of advisors want to give good advice, but some are inexperienced, inadequately trained, perhaps with no credentials, or they lack the breadth of capability in terms of products and services or expertise because of their training or because of their employment or because of their licensing. Now, also, unfortunately, some advisors are reckless or, worse still, simply ruthless. I've met a few in each of these categories. Now, I'll also say that I'm a little jaded when it comes to having seen situations with people that come in to meet with me, and I see where maybe the financial person put their interest ahead of the client, and so that does color my perspective and what I'm sharing with you. Now, why am I taking your time and mine to talk about this subject? Well, I'll come straight to the point. Bad advice can be much worse than no advice at all. For example, I've known advisors, and I'm using that word generously, who care very little for the client's needs or their preferences and just want to sell them a financial product. Would you be surprised to learn that with some advisors, everyone who goes in to see them gets the exact same thing? Literally, the exact same product, regardless of their needs? By the way, if you're an advisor and you're watching this program and you think I'm talking about you, then, well, maybe I am. For investors, I've got a few tips for you to help avoid bad advice. Let's get to them. Number one, never buy a product or service at your first meeting with an advisor. Unfortunately, there is an industry, as part of the financial services world, there's an industry or a part of it that teaches advisors how to be crafty salespeople. Now, there's a big difference between training advisors to be better advisors, to be able to properly present and describe the features, benefits, costs, limitations of products and services, versus teaching the advisor how to be better at selling and overcoming legitimate objections and hesitations on the part of the client. There are companies that literally teach advisors how to sell you and get you to commit to doing business with them in the first meeting. I kid you not. Now, here are some things that I want to add to that. The second thing is that you can ask the advisor to put the proposed product or service in writing. If they're making a recommendation to you, ask for all fees in writing. Ask for a written disclosure of the advisor's compensation. Ask what the advisor will do for that compensation. You know, it's all well and good that the advisor is very attentive during the process of you becoming a client, but then what about ongoing service? So you want to make sure you know how they're going to be paid and that they know you know and what your expectations are. Number three, don't give in to sales pressure or urgency. Good quality products and services that are available today will be available tomorrow. And if the advisor or their staff hounds you, calls you repeatedly, then maybe they're desperate. And a desperate advisor probably isn't a good advisor. Number four, explain what the advisor has proposed to you to someone else. If you can't explain it, then maybe you don't really understand it, and perhaps you shouldn't do it. And if you're single, take a friend with you to the meetings, any of the ones you have with the advisor. It's okay to bring them along. Now, if the advisor objects, well, then maybe you're in the wrong place. And number five, at the right time, it's okay to ask for references. Now, I'm not suggesting that you ask for client references during the first meeting with the advisor, but at the appropriate time during the process of working with the advisor about what you want to do, if you feel like it would give you a little more comfort to say, hey, could I talk to some other people like me that have done business with you? I think that's okay. And again, a lot of advisors will be comfortable sharing that with you. The key thing is for you to remember that nobody cares more about your money than you do. Sure, the advisor cares about your doing business with them because advisors are business people. We want you to do business with us because that's how we make a living. But it's your money. It's your timetable. It's when you're comfortable. If you need to take some time, then take the time. And I think if you do that, you'll stand a much better chance of getting good, if not great advice, and avoid bad advice. You've got to be willing to say, hold on, I need more information, or I'm just not ready to make a commitment. Don't feel rushed. Don't commit during the first meeting. I mean, good grief, especially if you just met the advisor or you've been referred to them by a friend, you need to take your time and get to know them and make sure that it's going to be a good fit because hopefully it will be a long-term relationship. If you do these things, you know what I'm going to say, you'll plan stronger.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.